The Brazilian people are incredibly friendly, incredibly loving, very outgoing, very talkative. They love to hug you. They love to touch you, grab your arm. So when you go to church, you're not like shaking hands. You hug everyone. Men will try to kiss you on the cheek. You have to tell them not to. So very loving, very warm, and that's something that I greatly admire about the Brazilian people is they just make you feel so loved and cared for. Some things that something that I really love about them is they're very open. So you would go in to teach a lesson, and more often than not, they want to share their life story. They want you to meet their cousins and their aunts and uncles. So they're very family oriented. They often have meals with all their family. Their family lives close together. They all get together a lot, and they want you to meet all of them and talk to all of them, which was great. So we didn't have dinner like you do in the States for meals. You have lunch in the state or in Brazil, and so we would have lunch with different families every single day. So it's kind of like a siesta. Everyone takes 2 hours and they go and have lunch. So you go and eat rice and beans and meat every single day, and everyone will always say come mais, which means eat more. So then you just keep eating more, and you have to be pretty like, no, I don't want any more. No, I'm really okay, but it was so good to get them to not feed you anymore. They don't want you to do their dishes. They want to just serve you and be hospitable to you. So my companion would always have me distract them so that she could try and do the dishes, but they usually stop you. They don't let you go any further. Transportation in Brazil is kind of crazy. So you just walk across the street, you run across the road, you hope you don't get hit because people don't really stop. They just go really fast. When we were knocking doors, we would clap outside. You don't like knock on the door or ring the doorbell, you just clap really loudly outside. Something that is just funny for Americans who are learning Portuguese is you go there and you'll say, posso ter copo de água, which means can I have a cup of water? But for some reason in Brazilian culture, saying posso ter is rude and you're not supposed to do that. And so you have to learn to say, me dá copo de água? Will you give me a cup of water? So that was something that a lot of American missionaries got made fun of because they were always saying that incorrectly. Something else that's kind of funny is Americans often say sorry. And so in Portuguese, because I was so used to just saying, sorry that happened to you. Oh, sorry, that's so hard. I would say desculpa, which means sorry. Well, Brazilians don't say sorry that happened. It doesn't make sense to them. And so they would often tease me about saying sorry because it didn't make any sense to them. So Brazil originally was full of indigenous tribes. It's like Native Americans lived there. Eventually, Europeans, mainly people from Portugal, came to Brazil and settled the land, and they started to build cities. This was a couple 300, 400, 500 years ago, but they started to intermix with the indigenous tribes that were there. And then because Portugal had started to migrate to Brazil, they also imported slaves from Africa. So then all of a sudden you had African people who were being used as slaves. So then they started to intermix. Well, because Portuguese people from Portugal had started to live in Brazil, other Europeans started to move there. So you can see a lot of people from Italy, a lot of people from Germany. When my grandpa served his mission, he served in the southern half of Brazil, and it was only 2 missions at the time, and this was back in the 1950s. He actually spoke German on his mission because there were whole colonies where people only spoke German. So that was only 60, 70 years ago, and there are still places where they celebrate holidays from Germany or Italy, or Holland even, which is kind of unique. And then, really interestingly, in the last 30 or 40 years, Brazil and Japan started to have immigration to each other's countries. And so a lot of colonies were Japanese. And so so my mission president, President Kuseki is actually a Japanese name. So Brazil is a really neat place because there's such a unique, diverse group of people who have intermixed and who now live there. And so this culture, while Latin American in some ways, European in some ways, African, Japanese, and indigenous as well, it all sort of becomes this big melting pot, which was really neat to be a part of.
Yeah, the people are what made me fall in love with Brazil. The culture is just so open and loving, and it's like, I don't know, there's just this different feel that they're really family oriented, and it's so different from here. People are a lot louder and they have a lot more energy, I would say, than Americans do as well. A lot of the time, the way the structure and like the buildings and stuff were, they didn't have glass windows. There were lots of walls and different things that were up. But they kind of have a culture of sharing, like basically what's yours is mine kind of a thing. And you kind of get that with the different elders too. The Brazilian elders were very much like, they would eat everyone's food, or like they'd always be like, oh yeah, go ahead and eat my food. So that was something to get used to, because it's so much different. Us as Americans, like, we're used to being like, oh, I bought this and this is mine and I keep it. So but it was so cool. The culture was also very Catholic, I would say, in general. And the hardest part probably just with the culture was maybe getting them to commit. Because they were always really friendly and they never wanted to disappoint you. And so like, you invite them to do something like, oh yeah, definitely, like I want to be there, like I'm going to come to church and I'll read and do all these things, and then you have to go and follow up with them, and they're like, oh yeah, I said I was going to do that, huh? Like, yeah, I'm going to do that though. I'm still going to do that, but you kind of have to keep up with them, because they never wanted to disappoint you. But so like, they'd always tell you that they wanted to do something, but you kind of have to help them along. But also just with going to church and different things, there were lots of phrases that they'd say, like, si Deus quiser, like, oh, if God wants me to, I'll go. And, and it's basically just kind of like an excuse to like not go. Because a lot of the time we were just like, well, God wants you to go, or like, why wouldn't God want you to go? Like, what do you think God would put in your way of going to church? Or they'd say, se não tiver chovendo, if it's not raining. If it's not raining, I'll go. So that they had these typical excuses that they'd always say. I thought it was really funny. Very cultural. They had their go-to excuses. They always loved feeding people. Even just going door to door, someone would be like, oh, hey, we're making this, would you want some? Or like, hey, we just made some juice, like, you want some? The food was so good. I loved it, because it seemed like, it was all homemade. People wouldn't eat out like we do here, except for maybe in the richer areas they had a McDonald's. But usually it was like the really rich people that would go there, because McDonald's was way more expensive. But just your basic family, like the mom would always make, it was always rice and beans was at every meal. Usually there'd be chicken and their salad, but their salad was usually just tomatoes, not really lettuce. But it was so good, because every mom or every home kind of had a different twist on the way that they would make the rice and the beans. So it never tasted exactly the same. And so I liked that part too. Because in the MTC, it was rice and beans, but it was the same rice and beans every single day. You get tired of it. But out there on the mission, and then you get something different every single time. And I definitely had my favorites. Like, you go to a certain house, you're like, yes, today we get to go and eat lunch with this family or whatever. Oh yeah, that's also a different thing about the culture. The big meal of the day was lunch. It wasn't dinner. So like, we'd have our big lunch, and then like, just when we were out tracting or whatever, then we'd just grab dinner ourselves like really quick, or we'd have like a snack in our bag or something. Yeah, so eating habits were definitely a lot different.
We have arrived at probably one of my favorite subjects, talking about the culture. I love Brazilian culture, and I especially love the northeastern culture. It's incredible. They are so loving. You just need to be prepared if you're going for 18 months, 2 years, be prepared to just be loved, your entire mission. They love you a lot. Yes, there's people that might not like you so much, maybe from those, those denominations that we talked about. Some people may be opposed to, your beliefs, but wow, such a loving people. Sometimes we'd be lost and we'd ask someone for directions. This is incredible. Yeah, I remember a specific experience. I was with one of my companions, Elder Hikart, and we asked someone, and this would happen many times, but I remember this specific reason or this specific experience. So yeah, we just asked someone on the street to help us find this address. Or no, not even that. We just said, hey, do you know where this house number is? Because that's one thing to also notice that I didn't mention about the mission, is that the house numbers are, even in the city, they're very confusing. So you'll be asking around because, they're not in numerical order, because they kind of just like, we'll build a house and then build another house with a completely different number, and then another house with just a number that's not in, sequential order. So yeah, we were asking because we were confused about a house number. Hey, have you seen this house number on this street? And this guy was like, no, I didn't see it, but I'll help you find it. So he walked with us for like 10 minutes, just stopped whatever he was doing and helped us find that house. And it's just so incredible. They're just so helpful and super friendly in all aspects. Yeah, so wonderful. I love Pernambucanos. They are awesome. But yeah, so yeah, they're very helpful in those aspects. I guess if you want water, you can just go, instead of knocking on doors, right? You'll be clapping on doors, right? So as you go and clap on some of those doors, and you ask someone for a cup of water, you can definitely use that opportunity to get a cup of water and, give them the water that never ends of the gospel, right? So you can do that. It's great. So they have a culture, I guess, not speaking in a negative way, but it's, I guess, comparable to, the German culture in terms of drinking. Lots of people will drink openly in the streets. So that's fun, right? But you will definitely have some crazy experiences during the holidays. It's just such a very thriving, I'm not sure the adjective, just a very ecstatic atmosphere where everyone's just going crazy, having fun and whatnot, spending time with family. So yes, one of those holidays though, you will probably be staying indoors, is Carnaval. Carnival, I guess, translated. That's in February, so be aware you'll probably be staying indoors. While I was serving, we stayed inside from about 5 to the rest of the night. We go to our house at 5, our apartment at 5. Speaking more about the culture of your mission, the people they'll talk about the government a lot. They'll probably bring up that subject a lot. That's something that came up quite a bit. People talking about our government, kind of of course being a mission, you kind of have to avoid those subjects, but they're very concerned about corruption in Brazil, and so they'll talk about that quite a bit, and they have a very neat history. How the Northeast was established. I actually baptized he was an old soldier, and he would tell me all about, I'm sure one of you will meet him or hear about this man. He's he finds his way with the missionaries. His name's Panta. And so Panta, he's like this old soldier. He'd talk about the history of Brazil, and it's very comparable even to our U.S. history in a way, just kind of getting its independence from Portugal. There's some really neat videos that I've seen since I've gotten home about, how Brazil gained its independence. And so you'll notice that the people, it's a free country, and people, they like to preserve their rights as well. We have that saying by Patrick Henry, "Give me liberty or give me death." There's someone else, I don't know who, he might have been from the Northeast, I don't know what part of Brazil, but in their independence he said basically the same thing. And so you'll see a lot of similarities there with our culture and their culture as far as it goes. So it's amazing. They're free people. They love their rights and they want to protect them for sure. And so, yeah, you'll see that a lot.